What a Wild Spirit Brings by Lil, Chapter 58. The companions moved slowly, almost leisurely, neither wanting to overstrain themselves, knowing their bodies were recovering still. Their spirits were lifted with relief, and indulging in the moment, just the two of them, felt so contenting. Lil's eyes wandered, searching the rugged landscape for other signs of life, as she and Gimph meandered along. The tongues had almost no trees, but there were some short bunches of bushes, and amongst the rocks little yellow flowers grew scattered about. Lil hadn't noticed before, but these mountains were actually quite pretty. Not livable, but pretty. They turned to go around a larger tongue, and a huge gust of wind hit the women, the air circulating and winding its way through the shards of stone, almost knocking Lil down, and with the wind came wailing, shrill and so loud Lil slammed her palms to her ears. It didn't last long, but suddenly Lil was more than eager to be gone. Gimph seemed to share the sentiment. The two picked up their pace, not talking as much as focusing on escaping from the place. With the haunting sounds of the wind echoing in the tongues, it felt like it was now chasing them, always distant, but always as if it would pounce on them again, as if the wind was a living thing, stalking the women. Memory that dragons lived here became real. What if a hulking lizard came sailing in on that wind? When they slept with their backs to a mountain, they did not light a fire, but hid themselves, huddled together under blankets Lil created, curled up against each other, so warm and in the darkness, hopefully concealed. Both women were tired, but neither of them complained when they were both up early, walking again, always south. There was yet again silence, for worry had become louder than any words could have been. Lil was beginning to wonder what had been so pretty about this place, where every second one felt hunted. Gimph seemed to notice the increasing fear in Lil's movements, because she suddenly knocked Lil out of her thinking in one sentence. "So are you in love?" Lil sputtered, practically winded by the question. It had come from nowhere, and Gimph was walking along still, casually, as if she hadn't just knocked Lil for a loop. "Wait, what? With Trixian? How? What? I don't know!" Lil was blushing, her thoughts stumbling. What kind of a question was that? Gimph was getting further ahead, so Lil sprinted up to match pace with her friend again. Gimph's face was calm. When she turned to look at Lil, walking along beside her, she grinned. "I was hoping to stop the worry, not increase it, but I suppose at least your mind is elsewhere." Lil laughed, relieved. "You are the best. You're right. You totally threw me off." Gimph laughed with her, the more reserved. "Actually, I should go visit Trixian." They walked in silence again, but now Lil had something pleasant to dwell on. It was a mutual, friendly silence. Lil and Gimph both caught up in their own thoughts. Lil realized that she should try dream-walking again, after thinking about being in the wilder. If she could dream-walk, she could tell Blaxian where they were and what had happened. But Blaxian, what if a dream-walker had ways of warding a dream? And Lil was so untrained. She decided she would try it on Gimph first, since Gimph was her closest friend and would never dream a dream that would involve Lil being harmed. When they settled down to sleep that night, again cuddled together in a corner, Lil went merrily into the wilder, then placed her hand on the round of the hedges and focused on her smiling face in the mirror. It might even be fun visiting Gimph's mind. She would make Gimph a wonderful dream for them to share, perhaps of riding Griffin, and then good practice would also become good fun. She found herself in the darkness, breath catching yet again, trembling a little, but knew it was safe. Just scary, and it was much easier to not be overwhelmed this time, having known what to expect. She thought of Gimph, and immediately all shifted so that Gimph's dream was before her. She clamped both hands around the orb of light, still smiling. There was no moment of losing herself, no instant of almost ceasing to exist. She was instead instantly standing before Gimph, in a street, in the market of the Seat of Tri, where she and Gimph had bought things together. They were looking at some very sheer cloth, Gimph blushing, and Lil would have laughed if her body was not already being controlled by Gimph's mind. Lil chided herself a little in her head for having been so careless and not checking for the pulsing first. But it was Gimph, and at least Gimph was her dear friend. She was also pleased to find that this memory was a pleasant memory for the Haldani as well. Gimph looked lovely, hair let down, holding cloth that would not have been decent for a woman to wear normally. Lil felt her body move forward to grab Gimph's arm. Gimph, still blushing about something, looked over innocently. "You know what I want?" "What is that?" Gimph asked, almost absent-minded. "You." and to Lil's horror she was suddenly shoving the Haldani against the stand, onto the counter, holding Gimp's hands down as Gimp whimpered her name, and looked a little frightened, but not totally, for surely Lil would never truly harm her. Lil willed herself to stop, but the dream kept on, and she could feel her body forcing itself into Gimp's, grinding her pelvis against the other woman, still holding her hands down at the wrists. Lil wanted to cry, but couldn't, wanted to shout to Gimp that she could never rape her, but the words were trapped in her own mind, unable to escape into Gimp's. Part of her was shocked that Gimp could dream that Lil could ever hurt her. Part of Lil was amazed at how strong Gimp must think her, for the Haldani's arms, though they did try to lift, were always held down. Part of Lil thought the anthem would stop her, but somehow they had all faded in the dream, and to her deep grief, part of her found the woman beneath her erotic and enticing. Gimp was wrestling a little, causing their bodies to resound, and Gimp was still moaning her name, and Gimp's breasts were about to pop out of her dress, and Lil thought she felt just as horrible that she was committing the rape, dream or not, as she was that part of her was enjoying it. There was no denying that though Gimp was rather ordinary, she was also quite pretty. There was no way to deny that what was happening felt good, and as much as she wished she could stop, she also craved the climax building up between them. The experience continued, and even though rape, Lil could not keep herself from becoming one with the body she inhabited in Gimp's mind at the peak, at the wailing of the Haldani, still trying to move her arms, at the way it felt to take her. And when the dream finally ended, Lil rushed from the wilder, rushed from where they had been sleeping, ran to the first tongue she found, puking, sobbing, body racked with torture, with guilt, with pleasure. She shuddered with her bawling, her precious friend, her precious Gimp. The very same woman came up behind her, placing a hand on Lil's shoulder, asking worriedly what had happened, but Lil muttered around her weeping that she wanted to be alone. Gimp started to reach to hug her, and Lil snapped at her wordlessly. The Haldani's concern and hurt showed in the moon shadows, but Lil couldn't care. Gimp was better off anyway. Away. Lil scrubbed her arms, trying to get the skin of evil off herself. She was as terrible as a person as that damned King Rutford had ever been. The whole way walking the next day she wouldn't speak to Gimp or let the woman near her. They walked so far apart that they would have had to shout to call to each other. Gimp was clearly disturbed, but Lil couldn't stop thinking about it, couldn't absolve her guilt. How could she ever make it up to her friend that she had enjoyed a dream so awful? How could she ever look at her faithful companion again? Finally Lil came near to feed her friend. She formed a table and a chair and put a tablecloth on it, and spread out a feast for Gimp. The Haldani was stunned and did not take the only chair. Lil offered it to her, but Gimp remained standing. Lil, I have to know what is wrong. I have to know why you will not speak to me. I need you to tell me. Lil started crying again, shaking her head. Gimp did not try to comfort her. She awaited the truth patiently. I have done something horrific. And what is that, Lil? Gimp asked, as if she doubted it could truly be horrific, but did accept it was something Lil thought was. I cannot say. Do you not trust me? Oh, Gimp, it's not that at all! Lil shouted, eyes filled with assurance for a moment, and then she cast them to the earth, ashamed. This something you did, was it in the wilder last night? Lil nodded slowly, dumbly, still crying. Do you think I would think less of you? I am sure whatever happened was a mistake. Please talk with me. Perhaps I can help, Gimp said, gently offering, voice soft and inviting. Lil's tears gushed harder. Lil, I cannot bear to see you like this. I do not want you to ever cry. Lil could hear the honest sympathy and concern. It only burned. It made her guilt larger. I have wronged you. Gimp was surprised a moment. Me? Yes. After another pause, the Haldani asked, How so? Lil started shaking her head, but the woman was still awaiting an answer, and Lil deserved to lose her friendship, as precious as Gimp was to her. It was not right to allow the woman to treat her so kindly. Lil didn't want to lose Gimp, but she knew she would never be able to live with this. I'm so sorry, Gimp. I know. What did you do, Lil? I was practicing. I was practicing and I forgot to check for pulses. I forgot. You forgot to check for pulses? I do not understand, Lil. Before entering the dream, Lil said, eyes finally rising, knowing she deserved the look on her friend's face.